Hey, welcome. We are so happy to have you here with Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, and Mahopac people. Hi, and welcome. Today, we are going to share a wonderful story about Sybil Ludington Ogden. My name is Vin Dacquino, and Troop 271 and Troop 1597 is here to join us. Today, we're going to read a story. It's about an incredible young lady named Sybil Ludington who rode through this very village all the way back in 1777. And now, I'd like to take you to chapter 1. It's called At the Rocking Chair. The year was 1824. 47 years after the burning of Danbury, Sybil Ludington Ogden, at 63 years old, was never too old or tired to recount the stories of her past. Her grandsons were huddled together, very much the way you are right now, to listen from their favorite places on the floor in front of her. Edmund Augustus had just turned 13. Richard was not yet 11. Frederick was nearly 9. And Henriette had already turned 7. Mary and Emily, 5 and 3, had places of honor, very much the way Cadence has a place of honor next to her grandfather here with me. Around them, candles flickered. There was no electricity, and shadows danced on the walls like puppets. Their grandmother adjusted herself on a rocking chair and turned her attention to her grandchildren. "Before I begin, we will have to have quiet in here," she said. "But, grandmother," Edmund answered, "no one's talking." Sybil looked from face to face. All 4 boys were as quiet as mice, and the girls, wide-eyed, were staring up at her in wonder. "Well, that's a very good thing," she said, "because I am ready to tell my story." "Oh, tell us how you helped to raise your 11 brothers and sisters in Fredericksburg," said Frederick. "Tell us about milking cows and making butter and firing off your muskets to scare others." "No," said Edmund. "Tell about Grandfather Edmund and how he was a hero on the Bonhomme Richard, an American ship with Captain John Paul Jones. Remember, grandmother? Captain Jones was the one who said, 'I have not yet begun to fight,' when he was asked to surrender. And then he and grandfather fought all night long with the other men side by side against the British sailors on the Serapis. They climbed aboard and fought their enemies with knives and guns until the captain of their ship surrendered. I told them in school that I was named after my grandfather, who was a hero that day. Tell us about that." "Oh, man, we've heard that 100 times, said Henriette. "I want to hear how grandmother owned a tavern in Catskill after grandfather died, and when father was still young. Tell us again how you stopped drunken sailors from fighting and made them follow your rules." "Oh, no," shouted Edmund. "I'm the oldest. It's my decision which story she tells. I want to hear—" "Quiet," said Richard. "It's my turn to decide." "But what about me?" said Frederick. "I never get to decide what story she tells. I never get to decide anything." Their grandmother patiently pulled the girls in closer and lifted a finger to her lips. Silence followed. Mary looked up into her grandmother's face and whispered, "Please tell us how you helped great-grandfather Ludington when the British burned Danbury." Sybil Ludington Ogden smiled. Is that the story we shall hear tonight? All heads nodded yes, and the story began, as it always did, on a cold, rainy night in April, 1777. Grandmother straightened her skirt and began slowly. It was April 26th, 1777, and a cold, hard rain slapped against our house. My younger brothers and sisters were fast asleep because the hour of 9 had already struck. My mother was darning a sock for one of my brothers, and my father was in his favorite chair smoking his pipe. My father had worked hard all day at our mill and was ready for a night's rest with my mother. Since I was the oldest of the children, I got to stay up longer. I recall how wonderful I felt knowing that my father was there in the room with me before a warm fire. He was a colonel in the militia. Yeah, and that was a very important job, shouted Richard. He was in charge of 400 men who were volunteers in the army. Hush, said the other children. Well, his job was important, right, grandmother? Continued Richard. Yes, Richard, said the grandmother. Most often my father was away from home, in danger's way. As a colonel in the militia, his duties were many, including capturing dangerous bandits called skinners and cowboys who stole from the colonists to sell to the British. Many nights I feared he would not come home. He was so good at his job, added Richard, that General Howe of the British Army put a reward on his head for 300 guineas. General Howe said, "Hey, bring that scoundrel to me, dead or alive." Right, grandmother? Hush, said the other children. Grandmother smiled and reached over to touch Richard's shoulder. General Howe did put a price on Father's head. He said that Father was preventing bandits from stealing for him. He urged royalists, who were people loyal to the king, to kill my father and bring his body to him. Was Grandfather Ludington loyal to the king? Asked Frederick. Well, not at the time of the ride, she answered. At one time, most of the colonists were loyal to King George, but things changed. The king began to make demands on the colonists and charge them extra money for the things they bought from England. Taxes, said Henriette. Yes, Henriette, taxes, she answered. And when the king tried to charge taxes for tea, the colonists dressed up like Indians and dumped the tea into the bay, Henriette added. It was called the Boston Tea Party. Richard's eyes widened. Whoa, was Boston where you lived, grandmother? Did you see them do it? No, silly, Edmund said. Boston is in Massachusetts. Grandmother lived in Fredericksburg, New York, and the Tea Party was in 1775. A famous man named Paul Revere rode to warn his neighbors about the British in 1775. Grandmother rode in 1777. Everyone was silent, staring at Edmund. Finally, Grandmother said, "Why, that is very good, Edmund, and perfectly correct. But you should not call your brother silly for something he is trying to learn." The trouble did begin in Boston, Richard, but we in Fredericksburg started dividing against the king soon after. Some of my own neighbors and their families wanted to support the king because he was in charge of our father country. They said we would not even be in America if not for the king. Others, like my father and the men in his militia, were patriots. They believed that we earned the right to be free. We should fight for our independence. Is that why you rode that night in April? Richard asked. It's exactly why I rode that night, she said. My father and other patriots were preparing for trouble with the British. Our supplies had been attacked near our home in Peekskill, and we feared for our supplies in nearby Connecticut. Did the British try to destroy the supplies? Asked Henriette. They did, she answered. General Tryon of the British Army heard of the munitions that were stored in Danbury, and he landed over 2,000 men at Campo Beach on the shores of Connecticut, determined to destroy anyone who got in his way. He marched up through Connecticut, terrifying everyone he passed. And that's where you come in, right, Grandmother? Asked Richard. That is precisely where I come in, she said. Suddenly, Mary began tugging at her grandmother's feet. Yes? What is it, Mary? Mary stood and whispered something into grandmother's ear. Ooh, well then, grandmother whispered, I guess this will be a good time to take a break. Poor Mary had to leave the room. Chapter 2, The Messenger. Why don't you sit here, it'll be easier. When the children were back in their places, grandmother was ready to continue. On a cold night in April, 1777, April 26, Richard interrupted. Hush! The children shouted. Yes, Richard. On April 26, 1777, I was sitting by the fire with my mother and father, and so grateful to have father with me that I was almost unaware of the expression on his face. Something was very wrong. Even the dim light of the heart could not hide my father's fear. And then I heard it. Someone was approaching on horseback. It's 9 o'clock on a Sunday night. Who would dare come here at this hour in this weather? Mother asked. Father jumped to his feet for his musket, and I dared not leave his side. We stood together by the front door without lifting the hatch and listened as the rider dismounted and approached. And then his sudden pounding on the door nearly frightened me to death. Who goes there? Father asked. Messenger, a man's voice said, bearing a message from our American generals, Silman, Wooster, and Arnold. This time, it was Edmund who jumped up from his place on the rug and shouted. He was talking about Benedict Arnold, who was not yet a traitor at the time of the ride. You are right, Edmund, grandmother said. Benedict Arnold did become a traitor later in his life, but all three of those generals were important officers on the night of my ride. So my father unlatched the door. The man stood before us, exhausted and wet from head to toe. Rain dripped onto his nose from the brim of his hat, and mud smudged his damp and furrowed cheeks. Why have you come to us? Father asked. The man did not speak right away. He pointed to the east and looked off, astonished. The sky was crimson red. What is that? Father asked in a whisper. Danbury, sir, was his answer. General Tryon of the British has raided the city to destroy our munitions there. Barrels of molasses, flour, and sugar are being destroyed. Tents, shoes, blankets, medical supplies are being burned. Citizens of the city are greatly endangered, and we need your men as quickly as possible. Father stood speechless. And then he spoke as if he were in a daze. Danbury is almost 20 miles from here. My men are farmers. They're asleep at this hour. Their homes are scattered across the countryside. It will take hours to gather them. I cannot go. I must be here to give orders as they arrive. And you messenger, you're much too weak. He paused and he faced the messenger, soldier to soldier. I have no one to send, he said. This time, all 6 children looked in the grandmother's eyes and said together, send me! Grandmother smiled and said, yes. I said, he must send me. I was the only one who knew the trails and paths to the farms of the men in his regiment. I had been to their homes many times with Father. There truly was no one else to send. Henry A. jumped up so quickly, he startled the other 5 children. Great-grandfather Ludington hugged your mother and said sadly, this soldier is needed for an important mission. We must dress her warmly and prepare Star for the journey." "Yes," said Edmund, "you were quite scared, but proud. And your mother, who was white with fear, said, 'I will fix some food to take with her. You must get her something to wrap on the doors. She will have no time to dismount at each house.'" "Thank you, Edmund," Grandmother said. "That is just how it was. When I was up on Star, Father took my hand and said, 'You cannot go to every house. Concentrate on the homes of my officers and tell them they must alert their own troops.' He squeezed my hand as if it were the last time he would ever do so. And when I rode into the dark and rainy night, I dared not turn back to see the fear in their faces. For I knew if I had, I would never have been able to continue on." Next chapter, The Ride. I went by way of Horsebound Road and prayed for the rain to let up. The night was cold, and Star labored along with great difficulty. I could see his breath coming in quick puffs from his large nostrils. I reached my hand to touch his mane, and he snorted knowingly. There were so many places to visit, and we both wanted to gallop through the trails to complete our mission quickly, but we knew it to be too far dangerous. "You could have been killed if you galloped," said Richard. "Star could have fallen and landed on you, and you wouldn't be here today to tell this story." "Hush," said Edmund. "What you say is true, Richard. It was time for haste, but not foolishness." I needed to keep danger in mind as I mapped my route and forged ahead. There was so much to remember, so many houses to find in the woods. Several times I lost directions and struggled to turn the page. And struggled to remember where I was to go. It was always a relief when the glow of a candle or smoke from a chimney finally affirmed that I had chosen correctly. My father's officers and their families were truly alarmed when I rapped on their shutters. Many of them had been fast asleep. When they came to their front doors, I shouted, "Wake up! Prepare for battle! The British have attacked Connecticut. Danbury is burning. Muster! Gather at Ludington's." Some of them urged me to dismount and come in to rest. They wanted all of the details of what had happened, but I told them I must move on. I pointed to the red sky, and thankfully they understood. "By the time your ride was half through," said Richard, "you could barely shout your warning, and you needed to rest, right, Grandmother?" "Yes. By the time I passed through Mahopac and reached Red Mills, it seemed as if I had traveled for days, and I had only traveled half the needed distance. Fortunately, I was invited into the home of one of the officers in Red Mills, a settlement fairly populated. I could not resist the offer and was given hot tea and warm soup, and do not recall to this day anything tasting so good. But then, before reaching Hitchcock Hill, you spotted danger," Richard said. "Yes. I spotted a campfire under a rock ledge in the distance and heard the deep voices of men through the woods. The rain was barely falling now. I eased Star ahead cautiously and whispered for him to please be quiet. I expected that they were cowboys or skinners camped out for the night. I knew I would be kidnapped or killed if I was recognized. They hated my father so. Slowly, I worked my way by them and did not gallop or make loud commands to Star until I was at a safe distance away. And then I galloped along a wide-open road to the home of one of Father's captains. The hours passed, and behind me I could hear bells from the churches sending out my warnings. Soldiers clanged long rods against middle circles to echo out their alert to even more neighbors. The word was being spread, and my mission was being carried out. But would the men get to my father in time? Would we be able to assist the poor citizens of Danbury before it was too late for them? And then you looked up, Henry A. said, and you could see that the red skies over Danbury were being replaced by the red skies of the sun, beginning to rise as you headed for home. I did, said Grandmother, and when I reached home, Dozens of campfires dotted the countryside. Many of the troops had arrived safely, and more were coming with each minute. The men shouted, "Huzzah!" And Father, who had been standing with his back to me, turned to face me. He ran and pulled me from Star and did not hide behind his manliness. We hugged and cried openly until my mother, brothers, and sisters demanded their share of me. After the ride, I watched with my family as my father readied his long train of men toward Danbury. Once the last man and horse were well out of sight, we went into the house. I sat at the table thinking only of my father, fearing for his safety, and was unable to eat the bountiful breakfast my mother had prepared for me. Soon, my mother ordered me to bed, and I was asleep. When I awoke, I was quite hungry and ate my fair share of food. Then I took to tending the Star and doing the many chores assigned to me. I was happy to be busy and tried desperately to keep my mind away from what could have happened to Father. I thought time would never pass until he was finally home again. Father returned within 2 days, and I nearly burst from happiness to see him arrive home safely. We listened, and he gave us his report of Tryon's return to the ship. The battle had taken place in Ridgefield and was not without casualties. Father lowered his voice when he spoke of the bravery of the generals. General Wooster, brave General Wooster, is dead. He was killed on the way to Ridgefield, he said sadly, and General Benedict Arnold's horse was shot out from under him. He was nearly killed. He almost never lived to become a traitor, said Edmund. Yes, grandmother said, and some of great-grandfather's men lost their lives and were buried in Ridgefield. It was one of the most important battles of the war, and you helped. Isn't it so, grandmother? Said Henriette. Sybil Ludington Ogden smiled and rested her hand on her lap. No, Henriette, she said. In many ways, it was not what is called a significant battle at all. But in other ways, all battles are significant. We are all important soldiers in the fight for freedom. I'm going to be a soldier and fight with my life to save people, said Edmund. Me too, said Richard, then Frederick, and then the girls. And I am sure you will all be good soldiers. The children turned quickly at the sound of the deep voice behind them. Henry, their father, was standing in the doorway. But it is getting late, and it is time for good soldiers to be asleep, he added. Their mother, Julia, stood with him, carrying a tray of cookies. And for now, their mother said, you must thank your grandmother for sharing her stories with you. You may each select from this tray of cookies, and then you must prepare yourselves for bed. Mary ran to her mother and grabbed a cookie from her tray. She ran to her grandmother and handed the cookie to her. Thank you for telling us your story, grandmother, she whispered, and thank you for fighting for freedom. Now you can applaud. Oh, yes. Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. Well, that is Sybil's story, and you see this picture of this soldier? Are you ready? You know who that is? Major Edmund Ogden. Sybil's grandson, the boy she read to, became a soldier and a hero. When he was 44 years old, he fought in Kansas, trying to save women and children. He got very sick with them, and he died a hero. Mary and Emily, I'm sorry to say, Mary died at 15. Emily died at 21 of sickness. In those days, many children died very early, and very few people lived long lives the way Sybil did.
How come?
Because they didn't have drugstores and doctors and medicine the way we do today. Living in those days was very, very difficult. And that's why we are so incredibly proud of Sybil. What she did that night was so heroic. She definitely could have died. And she sacrificed and took the chance of losing her life for freedom. There is a saying that we learn about freedom. It's freedom is never free. We have to fight for our rights. And Americans do it better than anybody. That's why we study Sybil Ludington as our American hero. Well, at this time, boys and girls, you can applaud again. Oh, yeah. Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. And you can ask questions. Good. Why don't you come right up here to the microphone so we can all hear. And what is your question?
Like, when did Sybil die?
That is a great question. Sybil died in 1839, and she is buried right near here in Paterson, New York, with her mother, her father, a brother, and a sister. Thank you very much. Come on up. What is your name?
Dylan.
Okay, Ann. Question.
What were the names of her sons and daughters?
Now, that is another great question. People have believed that Sybil Ludington was the mother of 6 children. Well, when I wrote my book, one of the things I discovered when I did an investigation was that wasn't true. Sybil Ludington did not have 6 children. They said, what? Yes, she did. Yes, she did. I said, no, she didn't. And I was able to prove that it was a mistake, that they were mixing up her 6 grandchildren with 6 children. So thank you very much. That was a great question. Come on up. What is your name?
Dad,
Yep.
why was Sybil so quick to respond to pick me?
Oh, say it again.
Why was she so quick to respond, pick me?
She said, he said, why was she so quick to respond, pick me? Because she was a very brave girl. And sometimes we forget that heroes are not only men, they're not only women, they're children too. And they could be any shape, size, color. Heroes come in all sizes. Great question, thank you. Come on up. I am so happy to have so many great questions. This has been a wonderful, wonderful show. Go ahead.
Did she have any pets?
Did she have any pets? She had one for sure. What was his name? Anyone remember the name of the horse? I give you a hint. He had a white star on his forehead.
Star!
Oh, star it is. Exactly. Very good. Thank you. Yes, Christian.
How old did she die at?
She was 77 years old when she died, and that was incredible because in those days, believe it or not, a 50-year-old was considered an old person. Because, again, people died very young. They didn't have the medicines and things we have today. Sir, come on up.
When was she born?
Excellent. When was she born? She was born in 1761. And her mother, ready, was 15 years old when she had her. In those days, some of you would be almost engaged already. Come on up.
When was her birthday?
When was her birthday? Another great question. Her birthday was April 5th. Her ride was April 26th. 3 weeks before her birthday was her birthday. 3 weeks before her ride was her birthday. So she was just about 16. She had just turned 16. Good question. Thank you. Yes. What is your name, Dylan? Oh, Dylan. Go ahead.
What's the oldest they lived up to? Yeah.
What's the
Oldest they lived up to?
the oldest?
They lived up to?
The oldest thing?
No.
The oldest they
left up to. They lived up to.
The oldest age? Believe it or not, her father beat her and lived in his 80s. But very few people lived in their 80s. Again, people died very young. Come on up.
How many children did she have?
Sybil Ludington was the mother of one boy. His name was Henry. And Henry had 6 children. So people confuse that left and right, because in one of the history books it said Sybil Ludington was the oldest of 12 children that her mother and father had, and they said she married Henry Ogden. Not true. She married Edmund Ogden. And because they mixed it up, they messed up researchers for years. And that's why this book is called Sybil Ludington Ogden. Ogden is her married name. Excellent question. Thank you. Yes?
How come the British didn't like them?
Oh, what a great question. How come the British didn't like Americans? Well, actually, it was kind of the other way around. They were fighting because the British said, hey, America belongs to us. You are our colony. And when we fought the French and Indian War, it cost us a lot of money. We need that money back. So we're going to start charging you taxes. For example, every time you buy tea, you're going to have to pay taxes on it. And the Americans said, wait a minute, I don't think so. And they said, yes, you are. And they said, no, we're not. And the Americans began saying, you know what? We're like kids who've grown up. We love our parents, but it's time to go. We want our freedom. And half of America was divided and said, no, no, no. We are loyal to the king. The king is like our father. We have to be loyal to him. And the other half said, no, he's all the way overseas. We're here. We're fighting. We're growing up on our own. We're fighting Indians, doing everything we can. It's very difficult for us. Well, they were fighting Native Americans. But the truth is, they were doing a lot of things, and they were trying to gain their independence. And finally, in 1776, they began this huge war for independence. Okay? Come on up. Thank you, Cadence. We're going to have to reserve our questions for people who didn't ask one yet.
How old was she when she got married?
How old was she when she got married? She was almost an old lady, 23 years old. And in those days, 23 years old to get married was old. Remember I told you her mother, Abigail, was 15 years old when she had Sybil. She had a baby at 15. By the time her mother was 23, she already had 10 kids. So it was amazing. That's what it was like in those days. That's a great question. She got married at 23 years old.
Wait, my sister could have got married. She's 16.
Yes.
How did they travel?
Good. How do they travel? They traveled on horseback most of the time. Now, Sybil that night traveled on horseback. I'm telling you that there are a lot of people out there who said, hey, wait a minute. If Sybil Ludington deserves a statue, man, so does Star. That horse went 40 miles in the pouring rain through mud. Well, a lot of people believe maybe that didn't happen. They believe that there might have been horses along the way. For example, in Red Mills, that there might have been a horse that she could switch horses in Red Mills and go the rest of the way on another horse, which may very well have happened. Who else did not ask a question yet? Come on up.
Continue asked one.
You might be able to get another question in there.
Okay.
Okay?
What were her parents' names?
Excellent. What were her parents' names? Her mother's name was Abigail. Better be ready for this.
Abigail.
Abigail. Her father's name was Colonel Henry. Do you know what her mother's name was before she married Henry? Abigail Ludington. He married his cousin. And he married his father's brother's daughter. And in those days, they did that because there weren't that many girls around, and he fell in love with her. And she was much younger than he was. Good, great question. Yes?
I have a good one.
Okay, wait a minute. Let's get first questions first.
How did they get sick?
How did they get sick? Another good question. When they went out into the cold and in the night, they got sick just the way you get sick. Mom says, button up that coat. Well, you know, they didn't have Kmart down the street. And they didn't have the mall. They couldn't buy all these wonderful coats and clothes that we have today. So many times they would get wet, and cold, and damp in the houses. They didn't have heat the way we have heat. They had stoves. There was no electricity. There were no lights. It was a very, very difficult time to live. They didn't have all the wonderful comforts we have today. So getting sick was a pretty easy thing to do. Great question. Who else did not ask a question yet? Milady.
How did they get food?
How did they get food? They went to the A&P. No, they didn't. They had to grow it. And girls your age wouldn't be sitting playing computer, I'll tell you that for sure. You would have been making candles, shucking corn, making bread. You had to work all the time. There were no stores to buy things. Everything had to be made, and I mean everything. You had to milk the cows. You had to get eggs from the chickens. You were busy, busy, busy. Sybil had to be busy all the time. She had all these little younger brothers and sisters to take care of. It was very difficult. Great question. Sir?
When Sybil was born, were her grandparents alive?
Good question. When Sybil was born, were her grandparents alive? I don't know. Tell you the truth? That is such a great question. I don't even know it. Her father came from Connecticut when she was an infant. People think she was born in New York. She actually was not. But she came here as a 1-year-old. Her father leased land, 225 acres, in Kent, what today is called Kent, and they lived there. But I have no idea if their parents were alive or not. Thanks for asking a question I couldn't answer. No, kidding. Yes. Who else did not ask? Come on up. You asked? Oh, my goodness. Come on up.
What happened to Frederick?
What happened to Frederick? Wow. This is such an amazing group. Another good question. So, here we go. Edmund died at 44 years old as a hero, saving women and children in a place called Fort Riley. Today, there is a statue in Fort Riley in his honor. Emily and Mary died very young of diseases. Her two brothers, who were they? Frederick and
Henry,
who's the other brother? Henry A. became soldiers. Frederick became a soldier, lived in California, his life with, who was the other brother?
Henry A.
There was Henry A., Frederick, Edmund, and Richard. And Richard and Frederick together lived in California. They were in the Army. They died regular, long lives. I think they were more in their 60s than 80s. And Henry A. became a lawyer, lived in Unadilla, New York, where Sybil lived for 30 years with her son and his wife. Yes, sir. Come on up. Is there anyone else who did not ask a first question and would like to? Okay, good.
How old was she when she had her ride?
How old was she when she had her ride? 15. 16. Just turned 16 3 weeks before. Good.
She was 15.
Christian?
If they didn't have medicine, that means they didn't have a hospital, so how'd they have babies?
That is a wonderful question. They had babies at home. At home. Women had babies right in their own bedrooms. They had what was called midwives, where they had people who came and helped them with the birth. Remember, and again, I hate to say this, but many times the babies didn't survive because they didn't have the clean hospitals we had today. Sometimes the mothers or the babies got sick, and many, many children died before they were a year old. Surviving in those days was not easy. And today we don't appreciate all the wonderful things we have that they just didn't have. Cadence?
How come they're not living how we're living?
How come they're not living the way we're living? Because it took years and years for us to get where we are today. And that's a good final question, because I am here to tell you that it is so important that you learn about the people who came before you, because many of them gave their lives for the wonderful things you have today. And they're people who have worked and worked and worked to make this country a free, comfortable, wonderful place. Part of the wonder of this country is the organizations that work to make children the kind of children that we can be proud of. Two of those organizations that I know are the Girl Scouts and the Boy Scouts. So give yourselves a hand for that.
Thank you.
I am proud to say I was both a Cub Scout and a Boy Scout. Yes.
I can also speak Breton.
Okay. Okay. All right. So, boys and girls, I think we need to wrap it up at this point. Again, there are a few people I need to thank. I certainly want to thank the Mahopac Library.
Christian, sit down.
I want to thank the Mahopac Library for giving us this time and for working on a regular basis with the children of this community. I want to thank Cindy Green for helping out. I would like to thank Mrs. Rose. I'm not sure she's here. My producer, Linda Shaw, who's here. Tim McAllister, who was running a camera and helping to get the show together. Pam Lawrence, who worked very hard to help us get this program. Say it again. Yes, the books are available, and yes, I do have them if you're interested. I also want to thank a very special person, Diane Vinipol, who did the illustrations for this book. She's a member of my writers group and an incredible artist. Proud of the job that she did. So again, I'd like to thank you all, and remember, if you do not learn about yesterday, you are cheating yourself from your tomorrow, because what we did then will help us become better at what we do tomorrow. Thank you for joining us today.